Imagine this. You're walking through a dense, sun scorched forest in India, and you hear faint cries. You follow the sound, and there she is, a 50-year-old American woman, chained to a tree, filthy, starving, barely alive. Her leg is locked in place. Her lips are cracked. She can't even speak, just scribbles a note, saying her husband left her there to die. But what if I told you that was only the beginning of the mystery, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was what it seemed? Let's piece this together, one layer at a time. It was mid July 2024 in the Sindhudurg district of Maharashtra, India, about 280 miles south of Mumbai. A few local shepherds were walking their usual path through thick brush and forestland when they heard something strange. At first, they thought it was an animal in distress, but the sound wasn't right. It was human, weak, faint, like someone barely hanging on. They followed it, and what they found didn't make sense. A woman, pale skinned, clearly foreign, was sitting on the ground beneath a large tree. Her body was thin, bones almost visible beneath her skin. One leg was wrapped in chains. Not symbolic, not for ceremony, real metal chains secured to the tree. She looked up at them. Her lips barely moved. Her eyes were hollow. How did she get there? Who chained her? And more importantly, why? When police arrived, they approached slowly, unsure if this was a crime scene or something else. They called out to her, tried to speak, but she couldn't respond. Her mouth didn't open, her jaw was locked stiff. Eventually, she handed them a note, scrawled in shaky handwriting. In the note, she wrote that her name was Lalita Kayi Kumar. She said she was 50 years old and originally from the United States. According to her message, her husband had brought her to the forest, chained her to a tree, and left her there to die. She also wrote that she had received an injection, something meant to treat psychosis, but it had gone wrong. Her jaw locked up. She couldn't eat or drink, and she'd been without food and water for over 40 days. It sounded like something out of a psychological thriller, but this was real life. The question was how much of her story was. Once medics arrived and she was taken to a local hospital, doctors confirmed her state. She was severely dehydrated, dangerously underweight, and in a catatonic mental condition. The locked jaw, real. She couldn't even sip water without assistance. Investigators started digging into her past. Who was this American woman? How did she end up here? They learned that Lalita had moved to India 10 years earlier, supposedly to study yoga and meditation in Tamil Nadu. Over time, she drifted from ashram to retreat, seeking spiritual healing. That's where she said she met a man, someone named Sadish. They got close, married according to her. But eventually, things soured. She said he became manipulative, cold, even dangerous. So she left him, moved west to Goa. But if that was true, why wasn't there any record of this man? And why did no one in Goa remember her? The moment Lalita mentioned a man named Satish, the alleged husband who left her to die, police began searching. They filed an attempted murder case and launched a manhunt across multiple districts. If her story was true, they were dealing with a serious crime, premeditated abandonment, possibly worse. But here's where things started getting strange. Despite hours of digging, no one could find Sadish. No marriage records, no identification. No neighbors or community members in Tamil Nadu or Goa remembered a man by that name tied to her. No photos, no documents, nothing. And when investigators pressed her for more, what was his last name? Where did they meet? When exactly did they marry? Her answers started to break down. Was she too traumatized to remember? Or was there no Sadish at all? That's when people started whispering, what if this wasn't a crime? What if it was something else? Back in the hospital, Lalita's physical health was stabilizing. She began drinking liquids. Slowly, her jaw loosened. She could speak again. And when she did, everything changed. She recanted her story. She told doctors and police that there was no Sadish, that she was never married, that the story about being drugged and left to die was, in her words, something her mind made up. She admitted to chaining herself to the tree. Why? She said she believed people were after her. She was hallucinating. She thought she needed to protect herself from an invisible threat. She thought the tree would keep her safe. Suddenly, the case flipped from criminal to clinical. But here's what makes it even more chilling. If her story wasn't true, how did she survive for 40 days in the forest? Think about this. You're alone in a forest, chained to a tree. You can't move. You can't even open your mouth to drink. And yet you survived for over a month. Doctors were baffled. So were police. Was she exaggerating? Or did someone actually bring her water and leave food, then disappear? Could it be that part of her story was real and part imagined? They ran psychiatric evaluations. The results confirmed it. Lalita was suffering from severe mental illness, including symptoms of psychosis. She was deeply paranoid, confused about time and identity, and prone to delusions. But that still didn't explain the physical evidence. The chains were real, and they were locked from the outside. She couldn't have done that alone, could she? So now we're left with the biggest question of all. Was this an episode of psychosis or a cover up for something darker? After Lolita was moved to a psychiatric facility for treatment, authorities tried to trace her history more thoroughly. If she'd been in India for a decade, someone must have known her. A friend, a coworker, an old teacher, but again nothing. The only records they could verify were a tourist visa from 10 years earlier, showing her entry into India through Chennai, and a few registration forms from yoga and meditation centers scattered across Tamil Nadu. She had no job listed, no permanent home, no emergency contacts. Her life, for the most part, had been off the grid. Even more puzzling, no one in the United States had reported her missing. Her name didn't come up in any recent alerts. No family members had stepped forward after the news broke. How does someone vanish in plain sight for 10 years, only to reappear in chains in a forest? And here's what haunts me the most. Was she truly alone all that time, or was someone keeping her that way? Inside the psychiatric ward, Lalita's condition became clearer, but so did the depth of her psychological suffering. She began recounting stories that felt like fragments of nightmares. She claimed that during her time in Goa, she was followed by shadows, that someone was using waves to disrupt her thoughts. That food tasted like poison, even water felt contaminated. She spoke about being watched, even while sleeping. At one point, she said her thoughts were being read out loud by others in the room. Classic symptoms of a paranoid psychotic episode. Doctors believed she had likely been suffering from untreated schizophrenia or a related disorder for years, possibly even before arriving in India. But still, the image of her, alone and chained, wasn't easy to explain away. And something else was coming to light. She hadn't just ended up in that forest. She'd made her way there carefully, deliberately carrying supplies, a metal chain, and a lock. Why? As police examined the area where she'd been found, they noticed something odd. There were small personal items arranged at the base of the tree: a folded shawl, a mirror, a wooden bead necklace, and a notebook filled with frantic, scribbled prayers. Some pages mentioned protection and energy clearing. Others were unreadable, covered in loops and crosses. Nearby, they found burned incense, a broken copper bowl, and remnants of dried flowers. It looked less like someone had been abandoned and more like someone had been performing a ritual. Could she have believed this was a place of spiritual testing? Was the forest, in her mind, some kind of sacred battleground between herself and imagined forces? Or was she reenacting something she had seen or been taught years earlier in her yoga or meditation practices, twisted by years of untreated illness? There's a line between belief and delusion. But sometimes that line isn't just blurred, it disappears. Doctors began asking the most painful question: how does someone fall this far without anyone noticing? Lalita had once lived in a modern world. She was from America, spoke fluent English, and had clearly been educated. Her writings, although scattered and unstable, showed signs of a once structured mind. So, when did the spiral begin? Records from her early years in India showed she had enrolled in several spiritual centers in Tamil Nadu, including one retreat known for silent meditation practices that lasted up to 60 days. Instructors there remembered her as intense, withdrawn, deeply immersed. But over time, they said, she stopped speaking altogether, not as part of the program, but after, even in public, even when approached. Some believed it was spiritual discipline. Others worried it was something darker. But no one intervened. What if the very environment she sought for healing became the perfect cover for her unraveling? Investigators eventually traced her last known location before the forest, a rented room in a quiet coastal town in Goa. The landlord remembered her, said she was quiet, polite, paid in cash, and kept to herself. She had no visitors, no phone, no internet, just books, candles, and notebooks filled with spiritual writing. One neighbor mentioned seeing her speak to herself. Another said she wandered at night, sometimes barefoot, humming softly or muttering things they couldn't understand. And then one day she vanished, left the room empty, the rent unpaid, a handful of clothes and a bundle of incense sticks still inside. No one thought to report her, because no one knew who to call. She had disappeared into the shadows again. Among the few belongings retrieved from her forest encampment was a spiral bound notebook, water damaged but still legible in parts. Inside were dozens of frantic pages. Most were filled with prayers, sometimes repeated word for word, over and over, hundreds of times. Others seemed more like warnings. Do not trust the water. They are poisoning it. Lock the soul to the tree so it cannot escape. He is coming in the shape of light. Do not believe the light. Who was he? Who was she writing to or writing for? Some drawings were scattered across the pages. Eyes, spirals, a tree with chains wrapped around its trunk drawn again and again. Was this her mind unfiltered, or had someone influenced these thoughts? One psychiatrist put it plainly: it's as if she was trying to trap herself before something else did. After weeks of treatment, Lalita began speaking more clearly. Not always consistently, sometimes her thoughts drifted mid sentence, but there were moments of lucidity. During one of those moments, she said something that froze the room. She claimed, "They knew I was hiding. That's why I had to become someone else." Doctors asked who they were. She paused, then whispered, "My family, the ones back home." It was the first time she'd mentioned the United States since the rescue. So investigators contacted the American consulate, and for the first time in over a month, a thread finally connected. They found her original identity. Her name was Laura K. Thomas, not Lalita Kayi Kumar. She had legally changed it upon arriving in India nearly 10 years ago. In her old life, she'd been a nurse, living in California, and she had completely vanished from her community around the year 2014. No police report, no missing persons alert, just silence. So now the question was no longer how she ended up in that forest, but what exactly she was running from. The deeper they looked, the more curious it became. Laura, now Lalita, had sold her belongings in California, shut down her phone plan, cancelled her license, and left the country with just a backpack and a one-way ticket to Chennai. In her final known email sent to a meditation retreat, she wrote, "I seek silence. I seek to disappear. I am shedding this skin." She hadn't been forced into hiding. She'd chosen it. And for nearly a decade, no one had ever questioned it. Why? Because she didn't leave behind anyone to look for her. her parents had passed. No siblings, no spouse. Co-workers assumed she had moved for a job overseas. She had told them she was going off the grid for spiritual clarity. And she did exactly that. But what does it do to a person to live 10 years in silence? What happens when your mind starts to forget what's real? One of the most unsettling details investigators kept returning to was this: the mirror. That small cracked mirror found beside her chained leg. It wasn't for grooming. It was old, unclean, and marked on the back with red ink symbols. And yet it had been placed carefully at the base of the tree, facing upward. When asked about it later, Lalita said, "It was to make sure I was still real. I had to keep checking to make sure I hadn't vanished completely." In a way, that mirror told the entire story. This wasn't just about a woman who lost her mind. This was about someone who tried to erase her identity, create a new one, and when that collapsed, she chained herself to a tree to prove she still existed. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted someone to finally find her. As her treatment continued, doctors began piecing together the full scope of Lalita's condition, and it was unlike anything they had ever encountered. She wasn't just suffering from hallucinations. Her mind had actually shut down her body. The locked jaw, likely the result of catatonia or extreme psychosomatic reaction, triggered by years of isolation, trauma, and untreated schizophrenia. The 40-day starvation. Doctors now believe she survived by drinking rainwater from nearby leaves in brief lucid moments, possibly eating insects or leaves when her body pushed her out of trance states. And yet here's the miracle. She should have died. By every medical standard, she should not have been alive when those shepherds found her. Which begs the question, was there something else keeping her alive? Fear, delusion, or some deep part of her that still wanted to be found? That tree, the one she chained herself to, became a symbol, not just to police or doctors, but to those who followed the story online. People traveled to the edge of the forest just to see it. Some lit candles, others left flowers. Some locals believed the tree itself had protected her, that it had become a silent witness to 10 years of psychological pain and a desperate cry for rebirth. But for me, the more I think about it, the more it feels like that tree wasn't just chosen. It was assigned in her mind, part of a mission she didn't fully understand. Maybe it was her punishment, maybe her protection, or maybe it was both. That image still sticks with me. A woman who tried to disappear from the world, chaining herself to a tree just to make sure the world would finally see her. Let's go back to the beginning when she handed that note to police. It was a lie. She said her husband had chained her there, that he had drugged her, left her to die. And yet, even though none of that was real, every word of it told a deeper truth. Because she had been abandoned not by a man, but by society, by the systems meant to catch her, by years of untreated suffering. She had been poisoned not by injection, but by isolation and unchecked psychosis. She was left to die by everyone who saw her unravel and looked away. So was it really a lie? Or was it the only language her broken mind could find to tell us what had happened? Today, Lalita, or Laura, remains in a psychiatric care facility under medical supervision. Her condition has stabilized. She speaks now, though not often. Sometimes she still drifts into silence. Sometimes she stares at the wall for hours, lips moving without sound. Police officially closed the attempted murder case. No charges were filed, because there was no crime, just a broken mind, a life that fell between the cracks. There's no villain to point to, no smoking gun, and in some ways that makes this story even harder to accept. Because what happened to her, this slow, quiet collapse, didn't take a monster. It just took time, and silence, and the absence of someone who cared enough to ask, "Are you okay?" I keep thinking about the chain. Not the one around her leg, but the invisible one. The one made of neglect, isolation, and systems that failed again and again. Lalita chained herself to a tree. But the truth is, we all helped build that chain, link by link, when we ignored the signs. She was a ghost long before that forest. A woman who cried out in ways no one could hear until the chain became the only way she knew how to speak. So now I ask you and myself something that still lingers. How many others are out there, silently breaking, just waiting for someone to find them before it's too late? And if this wasn't a crime, why does it still feel like one?